There's an old saying that goes, when one door closes, another opens. And nowhere is this more true than with our industrial heritage. As we wind down our series on the pioneers of rail travel, today we turn our attention to something that might seem out of place for a channel about trains, steam engines. But there's no way we could have chronicled the history of railroads without them. The higher the pressure inside a boiler, the hotter it gets until eventually the increased thermal dynamics can push through a tiny hole in the boiler-S firebox, allowing water to escape as superheated steam. That is exactly what happened in 1687, when French physicist Denis Papin attempted to create an apparatus capable of brewing coffee under high pressure. Instead, he created a rudimentary steam engine. This innovation, developed independently by several engineers, including John Smeaton and Ferdinand Verbiest, separated the condenser from the cylinder. Then in 1804, everything changed. In a small workshop near Manchester, Richard Trevithick built the world's first steam locomotive. And some of those answers came in 1825, thanks to the efforts of John Blenkinsop, who built the first rack railway in England. In 1831, George Stephenson and his son, Robert, worked together to produce the famous rocket, which won a prize offered by the Liverpool and Manchester Railway for an improved locomotive design. The rocket was an instant success, averaging 38 miles per hour during trials and proving the feasibility of nationwide passenger rail service. Thus, on October 1, 1838, the London and Birmingham Railway opened, giving birth to the modern railroad network. And thanks to the development of new materials such as steel, the power of steam engines was able to grow exponentially. At the turn of the century, both the US and Germany built their first 6100 engines, which would be supplanted just a few years later by the first 610 for built in the US. By 1909, the Big for Railroad had produced the first 10-wheeler, which was then eclipsed by the first 1010 built in 1913. Still, bigger wasn't always better. Smaller engines, such as the 280, proved extremely popular in the US throughout the early 1900s, thanks to the light rail principle introduced by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. In 1875, the world's first freighter was built, enabling heavier loads and higher speeds. Consolidation became the most common type of steam locomotive in the US and Canada, because it balanced fuel consumption, maintenance costs, and freight capacity. Meanwhile, Pacifics were heavily utilized for passenger service. The Union Pacific's Big Boy class of 488 for S were some of the largest steam engines ever built, with the largest member of the class number 4028 pulling an astounding 80-ton train up a 1.4% grade in Wyoming in 1941. Around the same time, the first of 100 and for 100 were built, which would prove highly effective for freight operations. After decades of debate, the last mainline steam engine was finally retired by the Norfolk and Western Railway in 1959. What about the internal combustion engine? Shouldn't we be talking about diesel? Well, we are. We've already covered the history of diesel engines in episode 223, A Blast from the Past. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend checking it out. And if you'd like to learn even more about steam power or watch some of our other incredible documentaries, head over to our website and subscribe. There you'll find exclusive videos and full-length documentaries that bring history to life like you won't find anywhere else. Plus, you'll get to watch ad-free. 6 years later, the C&O's famous 2705 made her final trip carrying passengers on excursion train number 133. Since then, fewer than 100 steam engines remain operational worldwide. Still, the spirit of steam lives on in places like Durango, Colorado, where the historic and newly refurbished engine for 193 makes regular trips along the Animas River, and with it, the ability for people to travel long distances quickly and safely was revolutionized. And John Frost, who designed the first public railway built exclusively for steam locomotives, the Stockton and Darlington Railway. In 1840, Robert Stephenson built the world's first for 40, an experimental engine intended to haul passenger trains at high speeds. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the first for 60 was built in 1860, followed shortly by America's first for 80 in 1864 and the UK's first 680 in 1865. Not even a decade later, the world's first articulated steam engine was built in the U.S., laying the foundation for future developments in locomotive design. His son, William, would go on to build the first for 60 in 1843, which was then eclipsed by the first for 2 in 1848. By the end of the 1840s, even larger six-coupled wheel arrangements were being tested. In America, the road was similarly paved with bigger and better designs. In 1847, the first 4-0 was built in the United States, followed by the first for 4-0 and a 4-0 in 1849. All the while, steam engines continued to push the boundaries of size and capability. Both innovations provided the perfect proving ground for the most powerful steam locomotive yet, the world's first 2-4-0, an engine known as Locomotion No. One built by Robert Stephenson for the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, Locomotion No. One became an overnight sensation when it pulled a train of 30 carriages along the line. Its success led to the opening of the historic Liverpool and Manchester Railway on September 3, 1830, which in turn paved the way for the world's first purpose-built passenger railway station, Manchester's Propia. And while it never quite moved accurately enough to be used on the rails, it proved the concept of a self-propelled steam engine with sound. Just 4 years later, that concept would be put to good use when Trevithick, along with Michael Pudosi, applied their knowledge gained from building the Penny Dern locomotive to design the first steam locomotive to run on rails. On February 2, 1804, the two ran their engine, dubbed the Blucher, on the Swansea and Mumbles Railway in Wales, kicking off the age of steam power. By doing so, the entire mechanism could operate at ambient temperature while still maintaining a vacuum in the cylinder. As a result, the Newcomen engine was transformed into the first true steam engine, capable of powering all kinds of machinery. Though he didn't discover the concept of pressure himself, Papin was the first to recognize that pressure had the potential to do mechanical work. This discovery would lay the groundwork for the first practical steam engine. So join us as we learn about the power of steam and how these incredible machines changed everything. While not particularly efficient and prone to exploding, Savory S engine proved the viability of steam power and led directly to the creation of the first commercially successful steam engine by Thomas Newcomen in 1712. It wasn't perfect, but the atmospheric engine did an acceptable job of pumping water from flooded mines and set the stage for further development. In many ways, the story of steam power is also the story of pressure. Think about it. That engine would be built by Thomas Savory, who used his military engineering background to develop a device capable of pumping water out of coal and metal mines. It took just over a decade for those improvements to come. In 1748, English engineer and inventor Thomas Coulter devised a new valve design that allowed the cylinder to be fully evacuated of air before each stroke, dramatically improving efficiency. This minor tweak to the Newcomen engine would be all that was needed to make steam power competitive with other forms of energy production like water and wind. With steam power now viable, the next question was how to apply it, and the answer arrived in 1769 with the invention of the separate condenser. But for the next half century, the practical applications of steam power remained limited to stationary use. Almost immediately, questions were raised about how powerful steam engines could become. This incredible pace of innovation showed no signs of slowing down. What followed was almost exactly what you would expect. As the technology matured, engines got bigger and more powerful. In 1855, the first six-wheel coupled engine was built by John Gray and Sons in the UK. By the 1870s, virtually every major city in Europe and North America had been connected by rail. By the early 1900s, the power of steam was reaching its zenith. As steam power matured, it spawned a wide variety of specialized engines for niche applications. Though the era of steam was drawing to a close, its legacy would live on. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed learning about the power of steam with us. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, so thank you for watching. Until next time, stay awesome.